Hi and welcome everyone to this Forum Civ and Union to Union co-organized webinar, Get Organized, Perspective from Labor Movements in Eastern Europe. My name is Amanda Sonesson and I'm the project coordinator for Sweden for Eastern Partnership, which is a Forum Civ run project that focuses on democracy and civil rights, civil society issues in Eastern Partnership. In the Eastern Partnership region. For those of you who are not aware of what the Eastern Partnership region is, it's including countries like Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. And today's webinar is organized by Forum Civ within the frames of the Eastern Partnership project and in collaboration with Union to Union. If you want more details on the work that Forum Civ and Union to Union does, or what the Sweden for Eastern Partnership project is about, we will post links to our webpage and newsletter in the video description. And in this lunch webinar, we will dedicate the upcoming 45 minutes to discussing trade unions and labor movements in Eastern Europe. With me to do so, I have Oksana Huz, who up until Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February last year, worked with the Youth Network for State Employees Union in Ukraine. And now Oksana is based in Sweden and works for Fackförbundet SD, which in English is the Swedish Union of Civil Servants, and it's a sister organization of the Ukrainian SEUU. And I also have with me Lana Willebrand, who is the Operations Development Officer at Union to Union, focused specifically on Eastern Europe. And last but not least, Inga Näslund, who is an expert on Eastern Europe and works at Olof Palme's International Center as a program manager for Eastern Europe. So welcome everyone. I want to start off by going back a few weeks to a trip that I made to Armenia, and I met there with the president of the Confederation of Trade Unions, Elen Manaserian. And the Confederation of Trade Unions in Armenia is an umbrella organization for 18 branch unions in the country, so it's a big organization. And I asked her what the main challenges for the union in Armenia are at the moment. And she mentioned that one of the biggest issues is a lack of awareness of rights. That is, that employees simply don't know that they have certain rights connected to work and to their workplace. But she also mentioned that there is a big misunderstanding of what a union is and what it does. She told me that many people simply believe that trade unions are like charitable funds that gives members some benefits like presents or coupons or organize some celebrations for their members. And in a sense, I was not surprised to hear this because, as you might know, all of the EAP countries were formerly under the control of the Soviet Union. And to my ears, this idea that a trade union is just a fund or to give you presents or celebrate something, it sounded like a consequence, a direct consequence of this Soviet heritage. So I thought that we should start right here, and I want to start by turning to you, Inga. I wonder if you could provide us with a bit of context of what the primary function of trade unions in the Soviet Union were and what legacy modern trade unions in Eastern Europe has to grapple with as a consequence or a direct result of their Soviet heritage.
Yes, that's exactly right. Trade unions of the Soviet Union, of course, odd enough, because Soviet Union was the state of the workers and farmers and everything, and it was very from start talking about the rights of the workers and everything. But that maybe is not consequential when you then see that the trade unions had such a superficial role in the Soviet society as it had. Maybe it was a consequence that they was kind of thinking that, okay, we did everything right, so we don't need the trade unions as they are needed in, so to speak, capitalist countries with great conflicts between the employers and the workers and so on. But of course, it's very fast developed trade union system with big, as you say, funds. That was one of the things they had. They had a lot of stipends they could give to their members. For example, around vacation time, you could go to their vacation homes and as it's called in Russian, sanatoriums. That sounds a bit strange for Swedish speakers at least, because it gives the feeling of, very sick people, maybe from TBC or something that has to go to rest. But that has a completely different sound in Russian and in these countries, because it sounds like a place where you can rest and get rested for the workplace and so on. So the big trade unions always had great vacation places, not only close to where they were, maybe in Russia or in Ukraine, but also at the Black Sea or at the Baltic Sea. So that was a very important part of it. They could also give out recommendations for studies, things like that. They were a social organization, actually. Something that you turn to for help, or not help in the meaning of help with the employer, but normal, like help in the daily life with things. They existed, of course, side by side with the Communist Party, which had a little bit different role and was more powerful in the meaning that they had the political power. But the trade unions were also very important in this network that was the Soviet style of ruling. And this is, of course, a heritage that the trade union brand has in Eastern Europe. Even if there was new trade unions starting and growing from the 90s with a completely different view of what the trade union is and how it should work, they, of course, kind of have this heavy heritage of just being something nice extra thing you can have. Really collective bargaining and things like that was nothing you did in the Soviet society. And this is, of course, something that the new kind of trade unions has fought very hard for in these countries. On a theoretical level, you must remember that the law, the legal side of the labor market was very nice in these countries. They had all the formal rights and everything was so great. But of course, in reality, it didn't look like that. For example, for women. But they had some kind of formal legal support. And what has happened after the Soviet Union fell is that they lost a lot of these formal rights, but they didn't they don't have at the moment so strong enough trade unions to make up for it. And lots of the work from the trade unions in the Eastern Partnership countries, for example, and also in other earlier, you said it so good, that was earlier under the Soviet. But I heard something the other day. You shouldn't say post-Soviet. You should say never Soviet instead. Post-Soviet is like you did it. You were there by will, but of course many of these countries didn't actually turn to Soviet by free will. Anyway, so that is a problem. The legal side have become much more bad for the workers, and the trade unions have not grown to support them. So that is the heritage after the never Soviet, in the never Soviet countries.
In the never Soviet region. Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember that these are 6 very different countries with different processes, and in terms of democracy, and obviously in labor movements and so on as well.
Absolutely.
For the past 30 years. So there are obviously different journeys for different countries, and we'll talk a bit more about that soon. First, I want to turn to you, Lana, and ask, we already now started to talk a bit about the modern transformation, and as Inga told us, one of the problems has been the legal bits since with the transformation from the Soviet Union to independent nation states. So if we talk about the modern transformation and international cooperation, I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit more about what this is and what shape and form it could take. For instance, the support between Sweden and Eastern Europe and South Caucasus.
Mm-hmm. Well, then maybe I'll start with saying that Union to Union is a rather unique organization in terms that it is a joint organization between three Swedish greatest confederation, LO, TCO, and SACO, that together work with development cooperation through Union to Union. An organization was created to complement that solidarity work that unions have been conducting since the beginning. And it is, we can even say that solidarity and international solidarity is like at the core of union movement from the very, very start, from 100 years ago. But in the 70s in Sweden, there was a possibility to complement that traditional solidarity work with more kind of long-term cooperation with the funds coming from SIDA. It's our Swedish Development Cooperation Agency. With other words, with the taxpayers' money. So, Swedish trade union movement and unions in Eastern Europe were using this possibility to have a more long-term capacity building projects together. And in the 90s, there was a lot of partnerships going on. And throughout this new century, the last 22 years, there has been kind of number of these partnerships were growing a little bit up and down. And actually, in the latest years, like last 5 years, it's become very few. And I'd say that maybe it actually shows the negative development in the region and the persecution of trade union rights. And we can give an example of Belarus, where all independent democratic trade unions are now liquidated by the state. It's only the state supported unions are left. And it is a little bit, I think, as Inga was saying here, maybe that's why this legacy is still alive, because they're so-called stately run unions, because they're not independent, they don't really choose their own leaderships, they are directly, we can say implementers, of the state will in the labor market. So those unions try in some way to work with these social benefits, though they don't have maybe the same resources. But anyways, that trade union cooperation I'm talking about, it's with the democratic and independent trade unions, and they are not as many. And the situation is different in each of these 6 Eastern European countries. So, for example, our work in Georgia and Moldova had some positive effects on, for example, labor inspections and occupational health and safety, thus making workplaces safer. So that is a good development result. Before the war, Union to Union, I think was one of the maybe biggest Swedish organizations in Ukraine, because we had these partnerships and projects going in basically all sectors. In like public sector, where Oksana is going to talk about more, with the building, with the transport, with journalists, and also with the national centers. But this work has also slowed down, of course, and we will talk about it later. So, and the last remark here, maybe, I'd say like this, that when the civic space is tightening, and it's become less and less possibilities to exercise this free will to organizing, then the trade union movement comes into play even stronger. And it's we can illustrate it like this, that each little union in each country is affiliated in its own sector, with other unions in that sector. Well, let's say everyone who works in them, for example, with energy, with water, with social services and so on in one country can be affiliated in the public sector unions. They have a sister organization in international federation on European level, and on a global level. So when those unions meet in the international environment, they can still exchange ideas. There is this colleague to colleague and member to member relationship. It's where the knowledge is being spread. So even in a very tight civic spaces, there is still a possibility to support each other. And it is, we can say that trade unions show the power in networking. And it is where we see also great results. Maybe I can stop here so we can go to concrete examples.
Yeah, I mean, I think you put it beautifully, and this is really like civil societies. I work a lot with civil society organizing in these umbrella platforms, but then you have unions who have been organizing themselves internationally for a very long time, and there is really like a power in this human to human or employee to employee aspect, very beautifully put. So I would like to then be a bit more specific, like you mentioned, and turn to Oksana Huz. You're from Ukraine, and you, before the war, you, as I said in the presentation, you worked for the State Employees Union there. So I would like to ask you to give us a bit of insights on what some of the challenges and successes has been for the SEUU in the last decade or so, and just focusing the question a bit before the war, because we're going to talk more about what has happened after the war later. So, yeah.
Yep. Yes, and I'm actually a representative public sector, like Lana mentioned. And of course, we should understand that situation in Ukraine with trade unions movement right now change every time. So what we talk today about trade unions in Ukraine, it can be absolutely change tomorrow, but of course we I think that with trade unions movement in Ukraine, it's a little bit maybe because labor movements is a little bit wider category, but we are going and we are doing a lot for change our trade unions movement. And of course, in this case, I representative State Employees Union of Ukraine, and State Employees Union of Ukraine is the biggest public sector trade union organization. And we are such a unique because our members, representative state sector, and we united members from national level, like administration of the president of Ukraine or parliament, and also members on the local level, like a city council or village council, or so that is we united policemen, we united fire workers, we united emergency sector, so a lot of difference. And that is a little bit we are different than that from Sweden. That's you are very sectoral in this case in public sector. But it's also like we have a 35% young members, and this is make us unique because of course then you have some quite amount young members. Sooner or later they start to think that they don't want anymore. They want to be members of trade unions, but they don't want anymore to be members of very sloppy, not powerful, and trade unions that you can even have a right to raise your voice and say what you would like. And of course, for young members, and sooner or later, then Ukraine start development, and it was before the war. Our economic situation wasn't so bad before the war, actually. And of course, then members can go to the gym by themselves. Then members can go to the cinema by themselves. They can go to the cafe by themselves or to vacation. Then they told you, we don't need it from trade union. We need that you protect our rights. That it should be, actually, we can go to cafe by ourselves if we will have a dignity salary. And then we can fix this. And this is, I think, was the main challenge for us. And of course, State Employees Union of Ukraine, we have been a little bit dinosaur organization, trade union organizations, and we started to cooperate with ST. And we have started from since 2006. And in 2006, it was the first seminar in Yalta, and it was in Crimea. And in this seminar, actually, we have our colleagues from Sweden, from ST, like trainers, and we focused to train young members. And the main topics was not even trade unions topics, it was leadership. And what we have in that time, so it was 2007, 2006, we was absolutely never Soviet Union or trade union organization. We have a lot of passive members. Some of them even don't know that they are members of trade union, because it was like then you apply for work and you show up on your working place, you automatically apply for trade union. And also we have such a team of all Soviet Union trade unions leaders, and they were so far from ordinary members. They like a club, and for ordinary members, they even sometimes didn't know what's really happened and what's happened in trade union, what kind of decisions they made. So there was like, and of course we had the situation then a lot of money or from affiliation fees they just spent on the local level for culture events, for Christmas cards, or for New Year party, or for International Women's Day, you can have a flower, and or your kids can have some gifts on the New Year Eve, and that was actually, or maybe you can go to some guide travel trip with, but it was all. And we didn't have collective agreements at all, so we didn't know what's mean. So and of course it's mean that and collective agreements at the basic of trade unions in some case and protect to employees' rights, and we didn't have it. And then we didn't have educational activities such for trade unions members, such seminars, training. We didn't know it. We maybe sometimes we have something like that, but it was very formal, and it wasn't like really trade union education. And of course we didn't provide in this case information or communication with our members. We didn't have it, but it's not because we don't want to have it, it's because we didn't know what's really trade union should do, how it looks like. And then it was like that. And of course in this case then we start to cooperate with ST, with Swedish colleagues. They show us one thing, that trade union in Ukraine is one of the biggest non-government organization with a lot of members. And for example, in the umbrella organizations, Federation of Trade Union of Ukraine, it's united 45 sectoral trade unions. We have, I think, like more than 7 or 5 million members at that time. And that's a lot. And that means a lot of resources also in that time, in 2007, 2006. And of course, Swedish colleagues told us that it seems a little bit strange that such a big organization with a lot of members, with resources, and you didn't do a lot for protect these people, for protect human rights. You are not so visible on the civil society. And this is strange, because sometimes you have non-government organization, there are only 10 members, but they are doing a lot. And then we start to thinking about that, and we would like that put a goal that we would like that trade unions will be an actor and have influence on the civil society in Ukraine. And we would like to see our trade union strong and transparency and sustainable organization. And we start to cooperate with Fackförbundet ST. And of course, I would like that we understood that, because sometimes when we talk about international cooperation, it is a question why we need to spend a lot of time, because we spent almost 15 years for now to change. And we should understand that if you would like to change something, it's not happen like this. It's step by step. And of course, in Ukrainian reality, it's not sustainable democracy, actually. Sometimes it's like a little bit like up and down. And in this reality, I think we are doing a fantastic work together with ST and because of cooperation. And the most important thing that all these challenges that we talk that we have like from 2007, we actually fixed it, and right now we have leaders who are really strong. We organize a youth network, and we organize youth organization in each regions, and they're very strong. Right now we have educational center in the CEU, and we have different educational programs with for different members, and it's fantastic for us. And we also educate cross-sectoral, and we also now most like 92% our organization covered by collective agreements, and we have a law about collective agreements in Ukraine, and it's also like a fantastic for us. And actually for the last results of the project, that we also include gender equality in these collective agreements. We include like working conditions. It's because cooperation with Sweden, we just see how it looks like in Sweden. And also right now we are work with before war. We have done a lot with salary, with wage for public sector workers, and we work a lot. And now they are not so dependent from employer; they can have fixed wage. So you just work on your working place, and you don't need to think that employer love you or doesn't love you. You do your work. And also we have a communication policy and strategic planning. Of course, we start to be visible on international level, because I think Fackförbundet ST opened the door for us for international world. And then I know that we have meetings with Fackförbundet ST, with union to union, and we talking a lot about how to make us more visible. And of course, if then you develop, then people start to interesting and want to help, and they want to know how it's possible to cooperate. And the most important thing that happened a couple months ago, it's just our government apply that now public sector workers, they have a right for strike. And we, together with union to union and with Fackförbundet ST, we struggle for that from the first day of the project, because public sector workers in Ukraine, they don't have a right for strike. And it's very nice for us. It's actually, even during the wartime, we have some results of social dialogue, and now we have this right. That's such important. Of course, it's always you try to do everything and solve problem in negotiation process, but it's good to have this option. And that's how it was and how it's now. And of course, war changed a lot. We will talk about this later. But we are very grateful, because we was a dinosaur. And right now, a lot of trade unions in Ukraine, they still, it's sad, but they still need to help, and they still need to help in development, because they still not so active, they still passive, and they still would like to operate and work by Soviet Union, values. But anyway, I think we right now we start to change it, because it's like, if you change one trade union, then we can work with others, and it's like it's very good. And I think that the most important for civil society, that's we start this process, and I hope that Ukraine will keep going to European values and European way.
I think that I think it's very impressive, I want to say, first of all, because what you're describing is basically like a top-down organization that has transformed into a membership or member organization with members as the people who decide on the future and the strategies and so on. And to do that in 15 years is, you said that it takes a lot of time, but still, like in the grand scheme of things, like it's quite short. So I think it's really, really impressive. And I think now is the time that we will also then move on to unfortunately talk about the war, because you, as you already mentioned, basically you did a lot of work for the last 2 decades, and now you have a new great challenge, which is this Russian war of aggression against your country. And so I wanted to ask you to elaborate a bit about or on how this has changed how your union, former union then, operated in Ukraine, and what roles the unions can play during the war. And maybe if you have time also, and we can discuss this more later, the reconstruction of the country, what role unions can play in the reconstruction after the war, basically.
So I think I will be very short on this because it's about timing also. But the first, that we still exist, we continue to work, and we organize a very strong volunteers movement. Because of course right now our members need help, and we right now our public sector workers, they work under very hard working condition, because sometimes it's bombing and they die in the working place because they working during the daytime, and that is very hard for us. And how because we, of course, how trade unions can protect our members from missiles attack or from artillery or whatever, especially for example in Kherson, they are absolutely under artillery, and they continue to fire workers, doctors, and municipality workers, they continue to provide services. But we organize the trade unions, we call it Trade Union Lifeline, and union to union support us a lot with that, and all Swedish trade unions also, and of course Fackförbund, that is still like sister organizations. And they also not only support us with humanitarian aid, they open the international door for us. And we, because of this connection, we start to cooperate with these humanitarian things with different trade unions around Europe. And that is actually fantastic, because of course we understood that afterward it will be not only humanitarian aid cooperation, but it will be also like development cooperation. We also see now how European unions going around Europe, like, because we start from Sweden example, but right now we can see also others examples, and it's such a good for us, and for our members, of course. Also, we have right now applied also not so nice labor law in Ukraine during the wartime, and it's actually a little bit cut down labor rights in Ukraine. So like trade union, we of course struggle with that, and we still protect the salary for our members, we still protect vacations time, we still work in about gender equality on the working places, and against also violence and harassments, especially right now in the wartime. It's very sensitive question. And of course we continue to work, and for example we continue to work to try to have a good social dialogue with the government, with parliament, because it's related to the, I want to say that even if wartime, we are doing our trade union work. And I'm very impressed my colleagues from State Employees Union of Ukraine, because they are working in such a hard condition. And the chairman of trade unions working sometimes like a driver to drive a van with humanitarian aid to help members. And also head of youth network, and she is the head of educational department. She also engaged in volunteers work, and she's doing after her normal working time. So they working extra, but they still are, and they are working too. And also right now they are thinking about how to change trade unions movement in Ukraine, because of course nobody want anymore to put this. Everyone wants to join European values. We don't want anymore be like just the sloppy trade unions, like a yellow or pocket trade unions. It's not what right now our members want, and they were very strong in this with this message. So I hope that some war, it's very bad, of course, but in our case also, it's give us like give us like a strong will that we want to change also trade unions and be strong and be visible in social in civil society. And I want to say also that we think about reconstruction, and I won't say only one sentence, that we all understood that after in our government and our parliament and others, we talk a lot about reconstruction right now, and it's on the media, but everyone talk about infrastructure, about factories, but nobody talk about people, about employees, about ordinary people who should build these roads, who should work on the factories. Nobody talk about rehabilitation for soldiers who can back from the front line, and that we shouldn't have a post-Vietnam syndrome. Actually, we should take care about these people, about soldiers who will come back, and nobody talk about people. And I think that trade unions should do it. And we think that we understood that it will be a lot of investments to Ukraine from business. And we think that trade unions should play like a very, very good role in that. And we should look at, of course, for reconstruction and rebuild Ukraine and our economy, we need employment market, because right now employment market in Ukraine is very bad, and we need working places. But also we need that these working places will be dignity, with good salary, with good working condition, that our employees, our workers, they will be not like slaves. So that, I think, will be field for trade unions. Because if Swedish corporations, Swedish companies will go to Ukrainian market, we would like have the same social guarantees, the same salaries, the same how Swedish employees have here. And that's, I think, will be big field for trade unions. Just be in this situation and stay together between business, government, and investors, and employees, and organize employees. So that is our view, and we will take care about our members and our fantastic ordinary people during this reconstruction time.
I think that I guess this provides, if you want to look at it a little bit positive. I mean, the war is never positive, but I guess what you're saying is that the fact that the country needs reconstruction is kind of a window of opportunity for unions to make sure that not only people who now are in the war and suffer, like this generation, but future generations as well, have like proper rights and dignified work and so on. So thank you for sharing that perspective. Before we finish, I have two more questions, and I want to turn to you now, Inga, and broaden the perspective a bit again. So as we already mentioned, the Eastern Partnership consists of 6 very different countries with different challenges and also different aspirations. Some are very far away from joining the EU, and some are closer. So I wanted to ask you what role trade unions can play in promoting democratic values and human rights in Eastern Europe and South Caucasus. Oh, you're muted.
Now I'm unmuted. It's a fact that the very core of trade unions is democratic and equal. And this is an important part of the work, because it's not only about rights and support for workers and so on. It's also by being an example of how you organize a democratic organization and how you can be a democratic power in a society. And of course, it's a responsibility also for trade unions to keep the democratic values alive and to give voice to not only the leaders, as it was described by Lana, where the leaders maybe become an elite club and the members are far from the leadership and so on. So this is a really important part of the trade union that we have in every country, has to keep alive the democratic and free tradition with elected leaders, and to bring the youth, the women, and so on in front in the trade union work. And be an example, as I said. So this is general. But then, of course, as you say, the conditions are very different in the 6 Eastern Partnership countries. We have the very critical situation, I would call it, in Belarus, where the trade union, all the free trade unions, as Lana told, are arrested and in jail and sentenced to long sentences of jail, which is of course outrageous. I mean, how just for being trade unions they are in jail. Of course, they can find also other things to put on them to keep them in jail. But I mean, in Belarus at the moment, there is no law. There is no law in society. You can lock up anyone that you don't want to have free in your society. So that is the most harshest form of dictature, of course. Still, they are struggling on and they are planning for a better future. There are a lot of Belarusian trade unions in exile now, as with a big part of the Belarusian civil society. And they are planning to come back. So I have a great hope for a future, even for trade unions in Belarus, when Lukashenko is gone, so to speak. Then we have Ukraine, with which Oksana described. I mean, it's a very, very special situation with an ongoing full-scale war. And I can understand that it is hard to keep the trade union ideals alive when you fight for your life. I mean, it's a very special situation. Still, I think the role that the trade unions are playing, as also in the humanitarian support, will show that they are a strong factor also after the war. And I know that they are already talking about something very interesting, and that's the fair recovery of Ukraine after the war, when we have won the war, as we say, don't we, Oksana? Not if, but when. And then we have the other countries. I mean, there is very special problems in the Caucasus with Georgia and Armenia. Georgia, which has their political situation, and now with an influx of Russian immigrants in all these countries. I mean, I'm very eager to see what happens with that after where the war situation is calming down. Of course, also situation for democracy and civil society is different in the three Caucasus countries, with Azerbaijan as the worst example, and Georgia may be better, but still, I mean, there's a lot of things to do there. And then we have little Moldova with its very vulnerable situation due to the war conflict also. The other day, the president said that if Ukraine wasn't fighting, Moldova would also be a member of the kind of new Russian empire, most probably. But I know there are trade unions and free trade unions in all these countries fighting for a better future and a better conditions for the workers and so on. And I think they will, with the popular movement that actually trade union are and should develop, this will be a very important factor to build new democratic societies and to develop the democratic societies already in place. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, you're touching upon the extremely complicated dynamics and geopolitical aspects of this whole region with Russia and so on. It's like you can never analyze one thing or one country or one issue just isolated from the others. Our time is running out, but I would still, if it's okay, just like to ask Lana to briefly comment on what role trade unions can play in the process towards EU integration, because we have now two countries, Ukraine and Moldova, who was granted the EU candidacy status, and then Georgia, who is like a prospect, but unsure about what's going on. So, yeah, if you care to just briefly comment about that before we round up.
Yeah, let's be very short to the point. I see European Union's accession for these countries as like the most important engine to secure social dialogue and trade union rights and human rights. And it is because, as we mentioned today, the legal processes in these countries are very unstable. So European Union, its values, its legislation gives a very important compliance mechanism, a very important goal for all these progressive-oriented forces in the countries to strive to. And we know that the Russian influence that exploit the Soviet heritage is very big in the region. And you can feel it also in trade union movement. So that's why this having unions that have knowledge and competence and also access to the platforms, where the European values and the legislation can be put in force. It's super important, and it's what we are working with. And I can also say like this, European Union is not only just values, it's very concrete things that happening on the workplace. And think about also transition to green economy. Because labor markets in these countries, it's a lot of old factories. It's a lot of environmental problems. So ensuring just transition, understanding how the transition to green economy can be combined with social values, benefits, and protection. It's also a trade union issue. And here the European Green Deal can be kind of orientation for the societies. So there is a lot of things to do. And we really hope that this cooperation continues and grows, and that the unions, like Oksana has described here, that with all the young leaders, that this is like the human resource base. It is what makes the change possible.
Thank you for that short and to the point answer. I think it's universal to say that you want to continue discussing for hours and hours, but I truly would. Unfortunately, our time has run out now. So I want to thank you, Oksana Huz, who's working for Fackförbundet ST, Lana Willebrand from Union to Union, and Inga Näslund from Olof Palme's International Center for joining us today in this webinar that focused on labor movements in Eastern Europe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.